Hello, everyone. This is Ulf Andreasson here from Sumo Logic, and I'm going to be running the live demo today. So I'll just give everyone a couple of more minutes to get in and to get settled down. And of course, I'm going to try to get my own screen here in order so that I can see all the different windows and everything. But yeah, so let's give everyone a couple of more minutes and then we'll get going. And I got a dog here who's trying to make his bed or whatever he's doing. But yeah, hopefully he's not going to make a lot of noises. If you do have any questions, anything like that, feel free to either put in the Q&A or in the chat window, whichever is easiest for you there. Okay, I think we're getting settled down with regards to people joining the chat and the webinar here. So let's get going. So as I said, my name is Ulf Andreasson. I'm heading up the system engineering team here in EMEA. And as such, I sort of work with all the salespeople and of course with you, all our customers, and helping to position, helping to explain what Sumo can do. Kind of effectively translate the kind of technical capabilities into what kind of business benefits or what kind of value you would get out of something like Sumo. So today we more specifically going to be looking at application observability. And I got a few slides here to kind of set the scene. But basically, the main thing is going to be the demo that we're going to get into very soon. So yeah, and this is just an agenda. So we are going to be kind of looking at how Sumo handles application observability, effectively the different views that you can have within Sumo, within the platform, so to speak, and actually doing that through live demo. I then, given that you guys are interested in application observability, I also wanted to highlight something we call for the software development optimization, which basically is a way for you as a developer to get some insights around what you're doing, the type of deployments, the number of kind of releases and all those kind of things. And then we get some time for questions. Through the demo and through the kind of talk here, you can always put a question into a chat or into a Q&A window. So please make use of that as well, and we can kind of make sure that I cover those questions later on. If not, I'll do it while I'm talking, while I'm doing. Yeah. So just a very quick overview. I'm hoping that most of you know this, but Sumo Logic is a unified platform. We call it sort of continuous intelligence because basically we can draw sort of a lot of value and insights from your machine data on a continuous basis, right? And we also unify a lot of different kind of both data sources like logs, events, and metrics and traces and all that. But it could also be any other sort of data sources coming in. So if you get, weather reports, IoT devices, all that can be ingested as well. And basically, regardless if it's unstructured or structured data, we'll just bring it in, and then we can either kind of look at getting some structure when we're ingesting it, or we can just pass the data when we're actually running the search. So there's no need to, parse or format the data before you're going to send it to Sumo. You can just push it into Sumo as the kind of type of text it is, and then we'll look at it when you're actually going to do something with it. Now, one of the main things with Sumo is that we're all cloud native. We're born in the cloud. We've always been in the cloud. We don't really have anything outside of the cloud. The limitation is that you're not going to be able to get Sumo run on-prem somewhere. But the benefit is, of course, that you don't really have to think about Sumo as a service, right? You're never going to have to update it. You're never going to have to kind of put some releases or manage your hardware or virtual hardware, whatever it may be, right? We automatically scale with your request, regardless if you're ingesting something like 1 gigabyte or 1 terabyte or even like a couple of hundreds of terabytes. We are pretty much getting sort of 1 petabyte a day from all our customers. So, the platform is very scalable, very secure. And we've been doing this for the last 10 years. So this is nothing new to us, right? We can handle this workload. We can handle all this. Now, when we look at what we can do with Sumo, there's a lot of different sort of types. We're going to be looking at operational intelligence today. But many customers are also using Sumo from a security perspective, because once you get all that data in there, you can start to look at it from, really having a proper SIEM solution, identifying the kind of incidents that are happening from a security perspective. Business intelligence, I would be careful though. This is not like a BI solution, but you can draw a lot of business intelligence from the log lines. If you're having some kind of, online purchasing platform, we can see how many products, how much money per order and stuff like that, right? We can draw that kind of intelligence from it, but it's not a proper BI solution. But it can still be valuable, because when you look at an application, you see some failures, you can then put that in correlation with like how much money is this function of this kind of application, how much is it impacted in dollar values, or sorry, in dollar terms, and that can be quite useful, to be honest. Now, we can also offer something we call global intelligence, and this is because we have all our customers in the same platform. Anonymizing that data, you can actually get an insight in how do you compare to others. You can be directed in getting benchmarks or guidance of like, if you're going to deploy some kind of application, what would be the most common sort of deployment sizes or sort of things like that, right? So there's a lot of very interesting global intelligence that we can provide, and that really comes out of Sumo. And all of this is kind of pretty much out of the box, right? We know most of the technologies out there. There's always going to be kind of custom applications and things like that we won't know about. But we really try to kind of have a lot of integrations, make sure that you are going to get a lot of value out of the box, so to speak. So not really having to do much before you kind of deploy in Sumo. Now, I'm not going to go through everything. And of course, we're going to be able to collect a lot of different sort of data sources. Now, the reason I put this here is that really to say, if you're in the cloud, you fully sort of, we cover you completely, right? And I'm not just talking about Microsoft Azure, Google, GCP, and AWS. I'm also talking about Okta, OneLogin, G Suite, Salesforce, all these other data services. You guys are mainly, or I would guess that you have much of your kind of workload, or not workload, but much of data is kind of put into Jira, PagerDuty, and GitHub. So we'll be able to cover that. But we'll also cover anything that you may have on-prem. So Sumo may be running in the cloud, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be kind of supporting you for all your on-prem systems. And another very big factor here is that we are fully behind the open source kind of movement in the space. So right now we have some beta project where basically our collectors or much of the way we collect data from on-prem system is actually using OpenTelemetry. We are fully behind sort of Telegraph to be able to collect different kind of metrics from various systems. And of course, any other Fluentd, Prometheus, all those kind of things are covered if you use Sumo. So there's a lot of good things for us, but we're not going to be talking about that. What we are going to be talking about is observability, and specifically observability in the cloud, with regards to applications here. So when we look at this, observability is kind of what everyone talks about today. But, you know, really to achieve observability, you have sort of some things that's happening there. So you're effectively going to be monitoring different aspects of your workload. And, you know, monitoring with regards to sort of metrics, that's very good. It gives you an indication of what's happening and what goes, what maybe isn't going as it should go. Now, once you start to diagnose things, you need a lot more data, because now you're going to have to say, like, where are things really not going as it should? And of course, when you need to troubleshoot things, that's really when you know, effectively you're going to be where you're going to have the most sort of need for as much data as you possibly can, right? I mean, we're talking logs, metrics, traces, whatever it could be to kind of satisfy your kind of your issue there. So depending on where the issue is and all those kind of things, but basically that's kind of one of the things that we need to cover. Actually, let me see. So yeah, we there's a question here, so I'm going to cover at least part of that question. So, any restrictions regarding cloud to be used for Sumo in custom multi-cloud scenario? No, it's not. I mean, effectively, looking at what Sumo can provide, we of course kind of support AWS, Microsoft Azure, and GCP. But even if you're running in Oracle Cloud or other clouds, it's just a question of how do we get the data being sent to Sumo. And we can do that. Oracle, we have sort of an integration for that as well. It's just not on this slide. I've got customers running in Alibaba Cloud and Tencent Cloud. That's a different problem because you're going to go through the kind of Great Firewall of China. But, you know, basically customers are exporting that data into Sumo in sort of a different location. So that should be fine. Yeah, okay, let me, there's some more questions here, but we'll take them later on. So in the kind of aspect of observability, so basically, you know, what we're trying to say with this slide is that Sumo's got you covered. We collect sort of metrics to really be able to help you with the monitoring aspects. We collect the logs and traces to really be able to go all the way down to the troubleshooting. And we collect that in one single platform so that you have everything in one single place, meaning that when you're in Sumo, you can pivot from sort of metrics to logs and all these kind of different aspects of what data you're ingesting. Now, we kind of really try to provide a user-friendly user interface where you can really kind of craft your own queries if you need to, but there's also a lot of out-of-the-box integrations and dashboards and alerts or monitors that would generate alerts. And we also cover this from sort of a, you know, microservices type applications, right? So whether you got 3-tiered applications like you had before, or whether you get like a full sort of microservices running in Kubernetes or in using Lambdas or whatever it may be, right? We got you covered on that. You know, there's different ways you can visualize the data. Some people want to have sort of a lot of dashboards. Sometimes you want to just fire off alerts, or you want to do different things, right? So you can do that. Now, most of the times we're really interested in the kind of more applied analytics, like really be able to identify anomalies, identify them quickly, and then do kind of searches across maybe correlating different data sets and stuff like that, right? So we can do that. We're using a lot of machine learning in the back end. Now, if you want to use machine learning, you can do that too. So we have a way for you to kind of use a notebook, effectively connect that notebook to Sumo, and then you can run whatever sort of Python code, or, you know, if you want to run some TensorFlow or something like that as well, you can do that too, right? And there's actually some more work going on there to something we call open analytics, which basically means that we can allow you to kind of interface with the data that resides in Sumo in a better way. Now, once the data is in Sumo, you can, of course, extract it as well. So, whether you want to run a search and extract the data, or you may want to kind of put the data in Sumo, but then you want to put the data somewhere else. So we can export the data to kind of an S3 bucket, and you can take it wherever you want to go from there. Benchmarking or optimization, I kind of spoke about that as well. But of course, really be able to kind of track what's happening, provide sort of guidance to you using the kind of global intelligence is what we do there as well, right? I think that's time enough for kind of, let's go into a demo instead. So, so generally what I would say here is that we got, the coffee bar application. You've probably seen this elsewhere in the kind of Kubernetes world. So this is all sort of a microservices-based application. Just running a coffee bar. So you can go in, you can order some coffee, like I want to have an espresso and I want to have some tiramisu. And maybe I want to have a cornetto as well, because it's almost breakfast, right? So that's going to be $3. I get a $10 bill and I get payment of that. And now this is kind of put into the system and I'm going to get my coffee, hopefully. We just do this because kind of give you the trace ID so you could actually search that. Now, I'm probably not going to search it, but because we want to be kind of quick and swift as well, right? But if I had any problems, I would, of course, kind of put monitors in my system and I would be able to generate alerts like this and send it to an email, or, of course, probably more likely you want to have a Slack channel where you can kind of see all these things. Now, this actually already been fixed, but I have some critical issues here with latency increase that I would see. So I can go straight into Sumo and see the kind of dashboard that I wanted to, or I can also see the kind of search here, right? This would actually take me into Sumo as well. But, we can put a lot of contextual information in here. So it's really up to you. And of course, you would probably have like a playbook and stuff like that as well if you wanted to. Now, going into Sumo, I do have my coffee application here. Actually, I could probably show this as well. So I do have like a business overview of my coffee application as well, right? So I can have like a panic button. I get the people who's in charge of this application, and then I can see visitors over time. I can see what platforms they're coming through, how many bookings, what kind of split between the bookings. I was ordering an espresso, and that's kind of what most people are ordering here, it looks like, at least for the last 60 minutes. But it could be differently. I was also saying that payments over time is actually going quite well here. I don't really have that many failed sort of orders, right? All of this is kind of light blues. It's all good. But what could happen is that I could take these orders, and if I see that I have a lot of unsuccessful orders or failed, I could then basically calculate the dollar value. Like I said before, right? Business kind of information here, that I could correlate with the kind of latency in the orders. And maybe this could kind of tell me that this is actually a high priority problem. Now, that's kind of a business overview, right? But getting into the application, we can see a lot more. We can see the latency, we can see the request over time, we can see the error percent. I actually have a bit of a service map here as well, so I can see the different components. Oops. And basically this, I can kind of move this around as well, right? But that's not the kind of main thing of it. But I can see the kind of service map of it. I see the kind of, there's a lot of latency here right now. So this is not really a well-functioning system. Looking from latency perspective as well over time, because this is just a snapshot, but this is actually more over time. And I can see that I got some spikes from kind of pretty much at the top of every hour. And of course, this is a demo environment. So we're trying to induce some problems there and kind of so that we can show something, right? But I got the requests over time as well and errors over time. So that's good. That gives me an overview of how that service or how that application is. Now, when you look at this, I can see all the different services as well. So I get pretty good insight into, if I just want to look at the cache desk, I can just sort of select that one, and then I'm going to be limited to just looking at that. I can also have some different views here. So right now I'm looking at the application service overview, but if I were looking at something else, and actually we have some RUM or real user monitoring aspects as well. So I could do that too. I could pivot into this, and let me kind of show you that, because looking at this coffee bar application and the kind of front end, which really is what's driving the application, now I can, or actually, let me step back here. So here I am actually, sorry, let me look at the RUM overview. So the RUM overview will tell me about sort of the page loads and the number of requests over time. I can kind of see an overview of what sort of browsers have been reaching out to kind of pull down the data, what kind of platforms are these browsers running on, and where, from a geolocation point of view, people coming to get my coffee site. I get sort of a brief overview of this, of the whole application, all the different sort of nodes into this. But, you know, as you saw, I can open it up. I can go sort of more specific to the front end, or I can even go to one of the kind of links here. Now, here I can see the absolute information with regards to how quickly do people get this, you know, time to interactive, time to paint, request to the end of it, and is effectively all the kind of nitty-gritty that you would want to see here. Now, looking at this as well, let me see, so I could maybe, I'm interested in kind of seeing the top 10 kind of browsers that I have in my system. I don't really have that many because we kind of just doing this as a demo environment, as I said, but this could kind of give quite useful information as well if you get a lot of different browsers, a lot of different locations or whatever it is, right? Just kind of hone down and be more specific. So basically this kind of, you know, this is my application running. And actually, just to show you that as well, right? In this, you can also kind of see the Kubernetes cluster that supports this application. So I got 4 different clusters here, but within the TCP application, or sorry, within the TCP cluster, I'm having the coffee bar application. Of course, there's going to be, you know, there's under the default here, there's some other applications, and then you get the usual kind of tube systems and those kind of things. But here's basically, again, my different services. Now we're looking at those as a deployment, and I can see if there's any error messages. You know, the beauty with this is that, yes, we do show you very much the same type of metrics like everyone else will show you, but what you also can do here, just click on it, and you can go straight into the logs for that specific pod or for whatever you're looking at. Right now, we're looking at the whole namespace, but I would see the kind of error pods for that namespace, or I could pivot into other things that could be of interest. If I went down here to one of the services, for example, I would effectively be able to do the same thing. You know, just select any of these things and go straight into logs for them. So it's really useful because you get everything in one single place. Now, you know, this is more infrastructure and you may not be so interested, but when you're looking around at this application, you may have to kind of, you know, take one step up and kind of look down at it. But what you also can do here is that you can go into the service map, which is going to give me a bit more interactivity with it. And in this case, I'm going to focus down on the coffee bar application again. I can see the map here. I can see some outliers, or not outliers, but I can see some services which are not really part of the network structure within the application, but these are still part of the application. So when we collect the traces for these, we can still assign them to the application, right? I can see my sort of browser that I'm basically coming in with. I can also see that I got a database here, a Postgres database, where effectively we're handling the cash transaction and stuff like that. Now, we're not instrumenting that, but because we can see the network connections automatically, we can sort of add that to the kind of service map. Now, what I want to do, and actually before I do anything more, I just want to show you that in this case, we automatically detect the anomalies here. And we're actually looking at this from a latency perspective. And actually, it seems like we do manual detection as well, right? So maybe that's why we're seeing so many red things as well. Yes. But yeah, you can actually do this as well. So if you have specific sort of things you want to look for, or as in you want to set the thresholds for different things, you can do that too. But you know, if you leave it to us, we can kind of do this, and we would have a learning window of 5 minutes, and then we would raise a color coding here if you see like latency, or if you were more focused on errors or whatever it would be, right? So that's one way to sort of just interact with it as well. Now, if we take this kind of Ruby function here, the machine service, because that's kind of part of where I want to check this, right? I get my order in, I'm waiting for the coffee, and I'm not getting anything. What I could do here is that I go into machine service. Now, I get this entity browser. I can pivot in to look at the traces for that service. And this is really where I could use my sort of trace ID that I got. I'm not going to do that here, but basically, you know, these are all the kind of traces that comes in. Now, I'm only interested in looking at traces that has some kind of error within them. So everything that's fine, I don't really bother too much about that. But there are quite a few number of kind of traces that has some errors, and I can just kind of hover over it to see how much time each and every service is actually using here. And this got kind of 12 errors within this trace. So when I open it up, I'm going to see the complete trace, including all the different sort of spans here. And this really kind of, I even see the kind of, you know, the activities that we did on the browser. So I can kind of really see what goes on there. But then I kind of come into the back end of this, and I can see everything that happens within my AWS environment, and of course, the kind of Kubernetes environment. Now, you know, this is, of course, quite small, so I just kind of use my wheel on the mouse here, and basically I can kind of open it up, right? And I can identify the error spans by just hiding the coloring, so I can kind of see that here. Sorry, I just see that there's a couple of questions as well. So UI API provided by Sumo to use Power BI. So using anything else, or actually, yeah. So one of the question here, right, is can we track and trace a single microservice? Yes, you can absolutely do that, right? So we can kind of put up monitors to do that, or when you're in the microservice itself, you can just kind of look at that. Absolutely. So in fact, this is a microservice down here, right? It's called water service. It's effectively going to get me water into this. And when I click on this, I can see more data with regards to this. This is just one invocation of that microservice, of course. Now, there's a lot of metadata around this. So, you know, just first of all, we can just see that, or we saw that before, right? It's written in Ruby. It's kind of this version here, and it's kind of we collecting data with open telemetry. It's run within Kubernetes and the different sort of deployments and stuff like that. We all have that information here. We could pivot away. You know, again, we are at this microservice here, but we could go up the kind of stack so that we get to the application or to whatever kind of part of the stack that we want to go to. In my case, I want to understand why this is failing. Something is going on here because there's an error, which also kind of transpires up into the system itself, right? Now, what we can do, or what Sumo does as well, we can tag every log line with the trace ID and span ID that we collect, which we of course do. That means that now when I'm looking at a specific invocation of a service, I can actually pivot into that by just doing a very simple search. We effectively search for that sort of span ID. I can then see that, yes, we did receive an order here and this is kind of the trace ID, span ID. The problem is that the water in the machine has run out. So effectively, there's no water in the machine. So therefore, we can't generate the coffee, which means that, you know, the order is not going to be fulfilled. And this has kind of caused the latency or the problem in this case, right? Just very basic, you know, conceptually very simple, of course, but that's why we do this demo, because it is conceptually simple for everyone to understand. But I mean, that is the case, right? This is what you can get, but just kind of using Sumo, being able to look at the metrics, kind of pivot into a view like the service map, and then kind of go into traces, go from traces into logs to really see the kind of problem with it. Now, of course, I would be probably having a better check with regards to water and coffee grains and all these other things that would be in a machine. So maybe that's a reason that I'm not being alerted around that the water is out. Or maybe there's some other problem with the kind of, the water hose or water pipe or whatever. So there's kind of things that I need to fix here, right? To kind of really get to the root cause of it. But this is kind of the first step. And just being able to do this in one single place, being able to kind of see all that and provide that information to you so that you don't have to run around to like different tools. The beauty with this is that I got the exact time frame of when this is happening. I got the context of everything that I was looking at in the previous kind of view here, where I just looked at this and kind of pivoted into the span ID. Now, if this was kind of something with the trace, I would be able to follow up all the logs for that trace ID as well, or kind of anything else that I would want to do. So there's a lot of capabilities that we can do here. Yes, so let me think. So that was kind of that. Now, yeah, that was very much kind of the top down. We started looking at the service, we went all the down into the details and got to sort of a final sort of situation there. Now, there's a different thing we can do from a Sumo perspective, and that's actually working bottom up, because spans are pretty much like logs are. So I also have the capability to search my spans. Searching a span is pretty much like searching a log. So what I can do here, I'm going to pick one of the services, and that's going to be the service called Cache Desk. It's here. Now, what I'm looking for, and to be fair, most of the data in the spans today is kind of very much metrics. But what I can do here is that I can look at all the spans for the Cache Desk service, which basically is what the question was before, right? Can I track and trace a specific microservice? And yes, you can. In this case, I'm going to look at this specific microservice, and I'm going to look at the duration, and then I'm going to say, actually, or let me group it by 1 minute, and then I'm also going to look at the status code here. So duration of the spans with the status code and grouping them for 1 minute. And I'm going to do that for the last 15 minutes here. Now I get this kind of list. I got like a couple of 200s, 402s, so 500s. And the 500s are just kind of creeping up here. So if I do this as a column chart, it's actually a lot easier to see. But yeah, you would start to get it going. So here we would need a little bit more investigation in this. And maybe we want to sort of take the spans and look at those, or what we can do here is that we can actually take this and go into just an open search, open up in search and be able to actually put the logs in here, put some other data sources in here. Of course, when we look at this, we're going to see the same thing as we saw in the previous slide. And again, going back to column chart, it is pretty much the same thing. Now, if we go in here and we add some log searches and we sort of correlate the data with other kind of logs and things that we may have, right? This kind of gives you an immense credibility or capability to actually look at specifically what the kind of data that you would want to look at here. Now, I can also see that this kind of spike here, right, it was really kind of spiking up. And of course, going back to it, this was in the beginning. So let me kind of, here you see like 522 million. And so something was definitely going on there in the beginning of the morning, right? But I mean, again, it's like this is kind of what we would be able to do. So the beauty with this, though, is that this is a bottom up. So I'm not really looking at a specific sort of, the application as such. I'm actually going in to target just a specific sort of microservice like the cache disk service here, which will basically sort of identify, where is it? Yeah, I mean, in this log search here, I'm just specifying that we're looking for that. So that's kind of another one of doing it, right? So let me see. So there's a couple of questions here with regards to KPIs in dashboards. And yeah, actually, that's a good point, right? Now, this one is a bit too complex. But let's say, or actually, let's go back into the coffee bar application. So say, for example, that you see payments over time, suddenly they are kind of increasing too much. You get the kind of search here. And what you can do is to say like, okay, you want to open up that in a monitor. This monitor would effectively say like, okay, if this kind of payment processed creeping up and that you suddenly see a lot of failed failed statuses, this is time sliced on 1 hour. But when you see the order failed here, what you probably want to do as well is that you want to, let's take away the success. And this is the kind of query that we would want to run, right? So we would effectively say like, okay, when we see orders being failed over by a specific time slice, we would want to kind of have some kind of threshold. That threshold could be static or an outlier, effectively static or sort of dynamic. This is based on logs, so we kind of selected or is automatically selected this here. And here I can see what we kind of see, right? So we typically having between sort of 17 down to 10 up to kind of 20, right? So if I want to say that when we see a greater than, and sorry, yeah, I want to have this when there's an alert, and when I see something greater than 17, that's when I'm going to be alerted. And this then would be to, I want to use kind of Slack channel for doing that, or maybe I want to have sort of some other systems. Maybe I want to open up a Jira ticket immediately, right? But, in my case here, I'm just going to take a, oh, there's so many, but yeah, I'll just take like a kind of prod one alerts here. So this kind of is effectively the payload that we're going to be sending over in that Slack message. As you saw before, I can really customize this to be whatever I want it to be. And then, of course, I can give it some sort of more details on it. I can also do recovery here. So if that goes down below the kind of 17 line, then I would actually auto recover this and not really have to worry with this. Now, in Sumo, what you would do, and I'm not going to create this monitor or alert here, but in Sumo, what you would do is you would be able to get in here and look at the kind of alerts that you have ongoing right now. Come on, you can do it. Yep. So here's kind of active alerts that are, effectively been for the last couple of hours here. They've been identified. These are the ones have been resolved. But here you would be able to kind of look at, specifically what's going on here. We would be able to trigger, kind of see what was triggered by this, what type of, in this case, there's a metric query. We would be able to kind of see the time series here. And we also analyzing this for some alert context. So effectively trying to see if there's anything we can learn from this, anything else that's happened. And basically, so yeah, basically sort of trying to give you some more information here. And this is really looking at the logs, seeing if there's anything we can identify from there that you should learn from. And of course, then we have some more sort of information about the monitor itself, any related alerts or how many alerts is this firing. So there's a lot of good information here, right? But yeah, so that's kind of something that, you know, you would do this out of box. You would, of course, also be able to integrate this with things like page duties or paging the right people and all that, right? So that would definitely be something you can do. Let me see, import use of external data sources. How does the mapping of attributes happen? It's one-time manually or automatically created. Mapping of attributes. So when we ingest data into, let's say, a Kubernetes cluster, we would effectively kind of look at, or, you know, the collection here would, some of this, you know, all of this data is automatically enriched by the collection. So when we collect data today from a Kubernetes cluster, we deploy Helm charts that would take all the kind of components. So we've effectively used FluentD to get the events and sort of some of the data there coming in. FluentBit will collect all the logs. Prometheus will collect all the metrics. FluentD then has an enrichment process so that for any metric, we would associate the deployment, the node, the cluster, and you know, the containers would have like which pods are you part of and all that kind of thing. All that information is part of what you see here, right? So when I select a namespace here, I would just be able to kind of pivot into that. And yeah, actually, it's probably better to just open this up. And let's go into the cache test deployment, which we looked at before. And then in that sort of deployment, you would have the pod. And then you would look at kind of the different aspects of that pod, right? But all of this is automated. And I should probably also say, even if this is a application observability, but we also have sort of a AWS observability, where basically it's kind of similar. We would look at all the different accounts that you may have, and then in this pod account, I then have 2 different regions, and within that region, I have all these different sort of services being used. So that's kind of a different way of collecting all the AWS data and sort of make a lot of sense of that. So yes, so hopefully that was responded to. And yeah, one question as well here, if I understand this correctly. So Sumo has sort of also a search API, or there's an API for pretty much everything I do, right? So if you want to do search through an API, or if you want to manage a lot of these things from an API, you can do that too. And of course, there's a Terraform provider and such as well. Hopefully I understood that question correct there. Yes. Okay, but so that was pretty much most of what I wanted to say. Now there's one more thing. So just kind of, you know, make sure we get all this correct, right? So first of all, we get an alert, or we didn't get an alert, but we looked at a potential alert. Now I kind of looked at this, I could see the application, I could kind of see the cluster that was supporting that application. And we could then sort of use the service map to go in and look at the machine service and effectively pivot into the traces from there, so that we really kind of get a good understanding of that. Now, in the traces, we could filter out to really be able to identify the kind of typical traces that we had some problems with. Pivoting or going from those traces in to see the exact spans and seeing what was happening within the trace, we could then sort of pivot into logs and effectively see what was causing the problem for that specific span and for that specific sort of microservice, right? Now, that was a kind of top-down. So we could really get a good view of kind of coming from the top and going down, right? Not everything is like that. And sometimes you want to look at things from bottom up. And that's when we did the kind of search on spans. And, you know, from that search of spans, we could effectively pivot in to create a monitor of that so that we can highlight if there's, you know, if anyone needs to be alerted by that. So that's definitely something we can do. And then I was just showing some more things there with regard to AWS and sort of how you can effectively see, how when we collect all this data, we're effectively making sure that you get all the enrichment so that you understand that searching in Sumo, you could effectively just go in and say, like, I want to look at an application that runs in this namespace on this cluster, and I want to see all the logs or all the metrics for that, right? So now this was very much about what you would do from an operational perspective. Now, if you are very interested in how you can handle this from an application space, you probably also look at the application development process. Sumo has something called the software development optimization, which really means that we collect data from the development tools as much as we collect data from the kind of running systems or the databases or the servers, right? We bring those in and we enrich and normalize that data. So when you have a deployment, it's going to be the same whether you're using GitLab or Jenkins or whichever kind of CI/CD tool you're using, right? Being able to sort of bring all this data in pretty much regardless of what deployment tools or what sort of development tools you're using in that chain, we can then sort of start to give you insights into the DORA metrics. And the DORA metrics, which now is kind of part of Google, right, is very much around how can you become a very sort of proficient and very kind of capable organization that develops applications. Now, how this looks like in Sumo is that in all my folders that I have here, I do have a software development optimization folder that basically gives me insights to the DORA metrics. And these DORA metrics here, right, they basically identify 4 metrics that they think are very key. It's deployment frequency, it's deployment lead time, lead time for changes, it's change failure rate, and it's time to restore service. I can see here for my own organization how well we're doing. And I get all the kind of details here in just like a table chart. So maybe not that sexy, but basically all the data is there. So it's just a question of if you want to visualize this in a different way. And if I haven't said that before, everything I've showed you so far, you can always go in and change the view. If you want to have a pie chart or something like that, if you want to add a panel to it, you can do that too, right? You're just going to have to make sure that, when we come with an update, that update, or you may have to kind of change that if you opt in to sort of to use that update, right? But we're not going to overwrite whatever you've done. So that's fine as well. Now, this is just an overview of the DORA metrics. You probably have a lot of, you may want to kind of go in and check different things here. You want to have monitors for this as well so that you can generate alerts. But then if you want to look into details of this, so for example, the CI/CD pipeline, if we want to look at the deployments, sorry, I'm losing my voice here. If you want to look at the deployment specifically, you can see that here, right? Now, we're not filtering on anything. So this could be, this is my whole organization. What I probably is going to be interested in more the kind of interesting thing that happened in production. I may want to look at a specific team or specific service. So I would be able to kind of select that from here. Now, come on, you can do it. So maybe, maybe take the back end because that's where kind of the important stuff is running in production here. So this is just going to give me an overview of how many deployments are we doing, how many of those are successful. So just looking at prod, all the prod, oops, okay, that actually I think was under production, it was running. So the thing here was that, all my sort of prod deployments were successful, but when I look at the back end of the team here, ouch, this is actually not very good, right? We have 6 failed deployments within kind of production and the backend team. You know, this may be something that needs to be highlighted, right? It all depends on, now I'm not completely sure of who does what here and all this, right? But basically these are the kind of things that you would be able to drill down to or drill into and really be able to see, like, okay, what services are we talking about, what teams are we talking about, and how do they perform? And, you know, if it makes sense, maybe, you know, compare teams to each other, or that's maybe a bit naughty, but you get the point, right? That you can really kind of draw a lot of value out of that, right? So looking at this kind of looks a bit better. Looking at the payment service, we'll see here. Actually, I'm not sure it was looking that much better. It's looking awful, to be honest. But yeah. Again, there's a lot of good insights you can get from here, and you know, maybe the builds are better in that aspect. So you know, let's see if we can get the production team again. Yeah, this is somewhat better at least. But so the point is that we can really kind of give you a lot of insights into your development process, as much as your kind of like how the application's going and all those kind of things. So that was just a very quick overview. Let's see if there's any questions. Feel free to post any questions in there, because that's where we are right now but yes. While you're thinking about any questions, I can also say that Sumo Logic is going to be at the RSA conference. So we do have a booth there, and if you are there, or if you know anyone who's going there, make sure to kind of contact one of my colleagues over in the US who's going to be there. And we would be happy to kind of talk to you more about what we also can do from a security perspective. So obviously not so much with regards to applications. But the other thing too is that keep an eye on sumologic.com events, because there's a lot of kind of things happening, and there's search jams, and there's kind of these kind of live webinars and things like that. But, you know, basically, that said, and yes, all of this, what I've shown you now, you can pretty much open up an account. Just go to our homepage and feel free to open up an account and kind of start to play with it. There's of course a lot of things of like how you can ingest the data and things like that. But, you know, me and my colleagues are happy to help you. So reach out to any of us if you want to do that. Now, I still don't see any questions, and we've been going on for quite some time. So I'm probably, if you don't have anything else, it was a pleasure to kind of speak to you. And, you know, I really hope you got some value out of this, even if it was kind of all over the place. But, you know, trying to kind of give you an overview of all the good things we're doing here at Sumo. So, as I said, if there's something, just email me or reach out to any of my colleagues around the world, and would be very happy to kind of speak to you again and show you more of what we can do in Sumo. So, yeah, with that, thank you very much.